Good morning, Hebrew nation, and greetings to the 12 tribes scattered into the four corners of the earth. Greetings to the 144,000 among them. Greetings to the grafted in Gentiles, grafted into the scattered Hebrew nation through faith in our righteousness, power, and wisdom, who is Messiah, Yahushua. Greetings. Greetings and blessings upon those that work in the healthcare field and the first responders trying to save lives every day. Blessings upon those that pick up garbage for us to keep streets and sidewalks clean and disease-free. Greetings and blessings upon those that make deliveries for our convenience, and double blessings on those that are trying to help deliver and save and rescue and recover the victims of pornography and child pornography, of prostitution and child prostitution, the victims of child molestation and pedophilia, the victims of sex trade, sex slave operations, and human trafficking, and double curses from the Most High Yah on the perpetrators who profit from these disgusting and abominable acts. Finally, blessings upon those that are homeless. 600,000 men, women, and children in the streets of America, and millions around the world in similar or worse conditions without a roof over their head today, in the first day of 2022 for the Gregorian calendar. Blessings upon them, for theirs is the kingdom, and blessing on those souls that are trying to alleviate that suffering while they can. Greetings to the chat, brothers and sisters. Thank you for coming. It's Brother Kelly, Brother Williams, Sister Isha, Brother Ben, Azariah, Sister Castro, Heavenly Garden, Sadak, all of your greetings, and all of whoever else is watching or listening in YouTube or in Power Talk. Greetings and blessings on you as well. We're going to continue part 2 of our study on the book of Revelation. We started part 1 in Thyatira last night, just the backdrop, and we need to continue doing that in Daniel. We're going to continue. We're going to review quickly what we did last night and move forward. I have to apologize. I did not have the email address in the videos on the live feed like I thought I did. So I did it all this morning. So I'm sorry. So we only got one question from last night, but because I didn't have the email in there. So I'm sorry about that. But it's in the description box. I think I got it in this description box and all of the ones from previous one. Chaplain Lewis, Shabbat Shalom. And so we're going to continue in that study. And if you have any questions, this afternoon will be the question and answer. So let's begin. So last night we began in Daniel. If you recall, we looked at Daniel. Well, before we looked at Daniel, we looked at Zechariah. If you remember, we looked at Zechariah first. And when we looked at Zechariah, we made note of Zechariah chapter 1 is particularly, we're just reviewing, so I'm only going to give you the one verse today. We made note particularly of verse 18 and 19 of Zechariah chapter 1. I'm just reviewing what we did last night. And it says, then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, 4 horns. And we made note that the horns represent power. Horns always represent, when I say power, it just could be power in general or a power, like a country, a nation, a kingdom power. Okay. And I said unto the angel that talked with me, what be these? And he answered me, these are the horns or the powers which have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. Okay, that's where we were last night. So these are the powers that scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. There were 4. And we talked about what 4 they are, according to the Bible. And Daniel showed us that. And we're in the 4th church of the 7 churches of the book of Revelation, Thyatira. And we're talking about the number 4. Okay, very important today. So as we looked at Daniel, we went to Daniel chapter 2. And again, I'm just giving a brief synopsis because we got a lot to cover today. But we looked at Daniel chapter 2, and we saw that the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, had a dream. And he had forgotten what the dream was. But he knew it was an important dream because it caused him to lose sleep. And he wanted somebody to tell him what he dreamt and then what it meant. And at the end of it, the Hebrew Israelites, Daniel and his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, received from the Most High the dream and the interpretation. And so he was able to relate to the king. This is what you dreamt, and this is what it meant. And we saw that the king had dreamt of a great image, and the image had 4 metals in it. And it was gold, silver, brass, and iron. Okay. And again, I want to remind you, we're talking about the 4 horns or the 4 powers that scattered Israel, Judah, and Jerusalem. Okay. So there's 4. So we looked at them, and then Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar, your kingdom, the kingdom of Babylon, is a great kingdom. The Most High has given you all power on this earth. You're the head of gold. But he said, after you, going to come another kingdom of silver, and then a third kingdom of brass, and finally a kingdom of iron. And then he told him about a stone cut without hands. And let's go at that part. Daniel chapter 2. Let's read first verse 35. That's what the dream was. And then let's look at the interpretation in verse 44. So Daniel chapter 2, verse 35, actually verse 34 and 35. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floor. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So all of these kingdoms were represented in the image, but at the end, the whole image was going to be destroyed. And the stone that struck it was going to fill the whole earth like a great mountain. Then he gave me interpretation in verse 44. He says, in the days of these kings shall the Most High of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. In other words, it's going to be run by the Israelite people. It's not going to be taken over by any other people. But it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. And we know that the kingdom that the Bible talks about is the kingdom of Messiah that he is coming to establish in the earth. And so it's going to be an eternal kingdom, and it's going to be led by the chosen people from which he comes from, Israel, and the tribe of Judah with David in Jerusalem. In fact, let me give you that. Let me give you a couple of witnesses, because we don't want to just make you think that we're just guessing this. Again, let me also encourage you, please, read your Bible. Read the whole Bible. Don't just listen to me talk to you about the Bible, or listen to anybody talk to you about the Bible. Please go read the Bible. Start at Genesis and finish in Revelation. It's going to take you a year if you find most of these reading programs that are available that give you a little bit to read in the morning and a little bit to read in the evening. It'll take you about a year. Read it. By the grace of the Most High, we're looking to finish the completion of this year's reading at the end of the Hebrew year in March. Praise the Most High. We talked to you last night about the difference between the Gregorian calendar and the Hebrew year. That begins this year. The beginning of our year is April 2nd, just to let you know. April 2nd is the first day of our year. Okay? Just to let you know. Okay, so, and I told you how we arrived at that with the equinoxes and solstices and all of that, right? So there you go. So let's take a look for a couple of witnesses of what we're talking about. We're right next to Ezekiel here. So let's go to Ezekiel chapter 37. Ezekiel chapter 37. Ezekiel 37. I'm going to start at verse 21. Ezekiel 37 from verse 21 down to verse 28. Second witness about the kingdom. Ezekiel 37, 21 to 28. And say unto them, thus saith the Most High Yahweh, behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen whither they be gone, and I will gather them on every side and bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, One king shall be king to them all, and they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms any more at all. Neither shall they defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions. But I will save them out of all their dwelling places wherein they have sinned, and will cleanse them. So shall they be my people, and I will be their most high. And David my servant shall be king over them, and they all shall have one shepherd. That's right. They shall also walk in my judgments and observe my statutes and do them. So much for doing away with the law. And they shall dwell in the land that I have given unto Jacob my servant, wherein your fathers have dwelt, and they shall dwell therein, even they and their children and their children's children forever. And my servant David shall be their prince forever. Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them, and I will place them and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary in the midst of them forevermore. My tabernacle also shall be with them. Yea, I will be their most high, and they shall be my people. And the heathen shall know that I, Yahweh, do sanctify Israel, when my sanctuary shall be in the midst of them forevermore. That's witness 1. Let's go to witness 2. Jeremiah. Actually, I'm going to give you 3, because there's just too many for this particular subject. But Jeremiah, because I got to give you a New Testament one for the Christians that are listening and don't believe. This is for the unbelief. All right. Jeremiah chapter 30. You see, so we're in Daniel. Here's a witness. We went to Ezekiel. That's a witness. Now we got Jeremiah. That's a witness. Praise the Most High. So let's go. Jeremiah chapter 30, beginning at verse 1. Beginning at verse 1. And go down to verse 10. Let's get witnesses here. The word that came to Jeremiah from Yahweh, saying, Thus speaketh Yahweh Most High of Israel, saying, Write thee, telling Jeremiah, write thee all the words that I have spoken unto thee in the book. For lo, the days come, saith Yahweh, that I will bring again the captivity of my people Israel and Judah, saith Yahweh, and I will cause them to return to the land that I gave to their fathers, and they shall possess it. These are the words that Yahweh spake concerning Israel and concerning Judah, concerning Israel and Judah. For thus saith Yahweh, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear, and not of peace. Ask ye now and see whether a man doth travail with child. Wherefore do I see every man with his hands on his loins, as a woman in travail, and all faces are turned into paleness. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. For it shall come to pass in that day, saith Yahweh of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off thy neck, and will burst thy bonds, and strangers shall no more serve themselves of him. But they shall serve Yahweh their most high, and David their king, whom I will raise up unto them. Therefore, fear thou not, O my servant Jacob. Thus saith Yahweh, neither be dismayed, O Israel, for lo, I will save thee from afar, and thy seed from the land of their captivity. And Jacob shall return, and shall be at rest, and be quiet, and none shall make him afraid. Witness number 2. Let's go to the third and fourth witness. Well, let's go first. So somebody might be asking, what about Jesus? Where is he? Is he in the kingdom? Is David really Jesus? No. Well then, where is he? Well, notice what it said, what the word said. See, we just listen to the word. We're not used to listening to the word. I'm be honest. We're not used to listening to what it says. We're used to getting Christians and telling us some interpretation of what it's actually saying. Just need to listen to what it says. Revelation chapter 19. Revelation chapter 19. I'm going to begin at verse 10. and go down to verse 21, Revelation chapter 19, from 10 to 21. And I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said unto me, see thou do it not. I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Yahushua. Worship Yah. For the testimony of Yahushua is the spirit of prophecy. And I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. And he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of Yahweh. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nation. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron. And he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Al Shaddai. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written. What name is it? King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Remember, his mountain fills the whole earth. So David is king in Jerusalem over the Israelite nation. But Messiah is King of Kings. So there'll be kings ruling of different nations of the earth. But over all the kings of the earth, even David, is this one, Messiah. There he is, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all that fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great Most High, that ye may eat the flesh of kings and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and the flesh and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, small and great. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that had worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. And the remnant were slain by the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth. And all the fowls were filled with their flesh. Same thing. What we just read in Ezekiel 37 is the same as Revelation 19. What we just read in Jeremiah 30 is the same as Ezekiel 37 and Revelation 19. See? But you got to read the whole Bible to see that. You can't just read part of it and think you got it, or a verse and twist it to make it sound like you want. You got to have 3 or 4 witnesses, 2 or 3 at least, to come up with something. People don't like to do that. But you got to read the work. You got to read the scriptures, right? Of course, Messiah himself talks about it. And there's so many places he talks about it, because the Gospels are eyewitnesses of, Messiah's life and ministry. So you're going to see a lot of, and then notice there's 4 Gospels. So what is it? 4 witnesses about the 4 powers that scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. And we're talking about the 4th church, Thyatira. And I'm giving you a 4th witness. Praise the Most High. Praise the Most High. Man, please, don't mess with Yah. Don't mess with him. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't even. All right. Let's see. Where am I going? I'm going to take Luke chapter 21. Like I said, there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I'm going to take Luke today, chapter 21, because Luke 21 also explains the scattering of the tribes of Judah, the southern kingdom of Judah, which also we've been talking about in the gathering of Judah and Israel, right? So Luke chapter 21, beginning, let's look at verse 20. I'm going to start at verse 20 and go down from verse 20 28. Luke chapter 21, from 20 to 28. Notice what it said. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Talking about the destruction of Jerusalem and the attack on the Israelites, Judah. Okay, that's what he's talking about here. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be days of vengeance. That's vengeance against the southern kingdom. These be days of vengeance, and all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. For there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. That's us. Okay, wrath upon us. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive. The true Israelites were led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles. Well, how long? Until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, which we're already seeing. And upon the earth, distress of nations, which we're already seeing. With perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, which we're already seeing. Men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken, and then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when all these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Fourth witness. There you go. So you see all of these things. We reviewed all of these things, the four powers. We talked about the kingdom. Now, let's go to Daniel chapter 7. Now we have established that the words have shown us that there are four powers that scattered Judah. We have established that those four powers, and we saw this. We saw Babylon as the head. In chapter 5 of Daniel, we saw the Medes, which were with the Persians, the Medes and the Persians, which Daniel 8 confirmed, come after them. We saw also Greece as the third power. And then the Bible showed us Rome as the last power. Now, I want you to please keep in mind, these four powers are the powers that have scattered Israel and Judah. Please also keep in mind that when we looked at Daniel and we saw the stone strike the image, it struck the image in the feet. And in the feet was iron. So that when the kingdom of Yah is established by Messiah and all those things we just read, Rome is going to still be around and in power. Okay? The fourth one. And that's what our focus is today in Thyatira, the fourth one. All right? So make sure y'all got me so far. So when it struck the feet, it hit the feet that was iron and clay. Iron was in there. It said the strength of the iron is in it. And we know iron is the fourth empire, Rome. Okay, so that's telling us that when the kingdom of Yah is established, Rome will be in power on the earth and be destroyed. Rome's power over the earth. So now you have to look at the earth today, right now. Remember, Revelation is things that have happened in the past, things that are now happening, and things that are happening in the future. So we saw the past, the previous kingdom. The present is Rome. The future is the stone that's about to strike the foot of the image. Future. So think about today. What is the structure of Rome now? How does it rule? That its power is intermixed in everything. Daniel 7 is going to help us with that. Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7. Now, we're going to be referring to Daniel quite a bit because Daniel and Revelation are tied together because actually Revelation mentions Daniel. Most people don't recognize it, but it's actually in Revelation chapter 10. Revelation references Daniel. It talks about a little book of prophecy that comes around the time of the end. And Daniel said these things are going to be hidden until the time of the end. It talks about itself. The meaning of Daniel being hidden until the time of the end. Well, brethren, here we are. Time of the end. Okay, so let's take a look. Daniel chapter 7. And that's why we're going to reference Daniel as we're going through the book of Revelation, because there are things in Revelation that unlock Daniel. And there are things in Daniel that unlock Revelation. Praise the Most High. And both of them, all the prophets agree with. So Daniel chapter 7, let's take a look at this, beginning at verse 1. Daniel chapter 7, beginning at verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. So now, this vision that Daniel gets here, that's now looked at as now we see as Daniel chapter 7. It took place, it says, in the first year of Belshazzar's reign. Well, there's a principle here. I'm doing this purposely so you can understand as we go forward. Belshazzar was killed in chapter 5. Let's look. Verse 30 of chapter 5. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. In verse 31, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So 2 chapters before, Belshazzar was killed. Why do I bring that up? Because not always the chapters are sequenced in the order of events. And it's important for us to know that. For example, that's how we start to understand, for example, that Ezekiel 39 talks about the first resurrection and Ezekiel 38 talks about the second resurrection. If you're thinking that it's in some chronological order, you're going to be confused. But when you understand it in the order I just gave you, it fits. Just so here, Daniel 7 actually occurred before Daniel 5. Okay, the same with Daniel 8. Both of those visions occurred before Daniel 5. And also among the things of importance with that, when you read Daniel 5 and Daniel is brought into the court of Belshazzar to read the writing on the wall, at that point, he has already seen the visions of Daniel 7 and Daniel 8. So he's already seen those visions and he knows what that writing means. Okay. When you think of it from that perspective, it helps you understand the situation more clearly. So when he walks into the court that night and they call him in and the king promised him a chain of gold or whatever, and he's telling you your kingdom is finished because he's already seen 7 and 8. And he not only knows that the kingdom is finished, he knows what's coming next. He says your kingdom is divided. Notice Daniel chapter 5. Verse 28. Daniel 5, verse 28. Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. He already knew that. He knew that from the previous visions he had been shown. Okay. And Perez means, in the Hebrew, it means divide. It means divide. All right. All right. Let's continue. Daniel chapter 7, verse 2. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea. 4 winds. Here we are. There it is again, right? The number 4. So now, 4 winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. Now, when the Bible talks about 4 in terms of winds, you know what it is, right? It's north, south, east, and west. 4 directions. It's not northwest, southwest, and all that. No. It's north, south, east, and west. So he said he saw 4 winds striving, fighting with each other upon a great sea. Revelation chapter 17 showed us, Revelation chapter 17 interprets the sea for us in Revelation 17 in verse 15. And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So there was a striving of winds, which meant strife, war. upon with peoples, nations, multitudes, and tongues. Now, why is that important? All of the established four kingdoms that we looked at, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome, became world powers as a result of war and bloodshed and strife. Y'all got that? So it was striving with each other. So Babylon had to crush, all of Egypt. It had to crush Israel. It had to crush Damascus, had to crush Moab, Ammon, had to crush all Edom, had to crush all of its competitors to become the top dog. And then after that, the Medes came through and crushed Babylon and crushed Greece and crushed other nations in order to become the top dog. So that when nations rule, they rule because they crush nations and kingdoms, established kingdoms, to become the top dog. And that's why it's very important to understand how the United States ruled. How did that come to power? Notice it didn't come from the sea. Watch. Revelation chapter 13, verse 11. This one did not come from the sea. How did it come? Revelation 13:11. And I beheld another beast coming out of the earth. Whereas all of the other kingdoms that we saw came as a result of strife, as a result of two armies fighting each other and bloodshed and takeover like that. The United States did not come like that. It came out the earth. Well, what does it mean? It's the opposite. So in other words, Ezekiel chapter 38 describes it, because it's so used to doing this. Notice what it says in Ezekiel 38. What does that mean when it comes out the earth? It's not a result of striving against nation. What is it? Ezekiel 38, verse 10, 11, and 12. Watch Ezekiel 38, 10, 11, and 12. It's going to explain to you how Gog and Magog through the United States came into world power after Rome. Watch. Thus saith the Most High Yahweh, it shall come to pass that at that same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods, and that dwell in the midst of the land. So in other words, it came in a place where people were living at peace. It was a lamb that looked like a lamb, but it was really a dragon. It came looking like Christianity. It came with Christianity, looking like peace. Unwalled villages like the Indians had. They didn't have walls in their villages when the Europeans came here, like they had in the islands, or like they had in the land now called Mexico or Central America or Brazil. They came with the cross of their white Jesus, and they just killed and took and raped and pillaged places that were previously at peace. Versus what we're looking at in Daniel chapter 7, nations were threatening each other because they were vying for power, which is why you have strife upon the sea. Does that make sense, y'all? I'm just trying to make sure y'all with me. That makes sense? So, okay. So now back to Daniel 7. So he saw the four winds striving upon the great sea. So this is nations fighting against each other for power and supremacy. All right. For power and supremacy. All right. Now, again, Daniel chapter 7, verse 3. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like unto a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had three ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it four wings of a fowl. The beast had also four heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful, terrible, strong exceedingly, like iron. It devoured and brake in pieces and stomped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now, let's go over this quickly because this is not, we studying 4, and we go into Thyatira, and I need you to see how Thyatira was established. Okay, so now you have the lion, that's Babylon. The second beast, a bear lifting itself up on one side. That's the shared kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. The Persians were richer than the Medes. The Medes were more violent. And if you notice, it was Darius the Mede that killed Belshazzar. But later on, the Persians, when you look at the book of Esther, and when you look at the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, it's a Persian king. The Persians were richer. Okay, they had more money, and they ended up ruling, but it was a shared kingdom. That's why it rose up on one side, because one side was stronger than the other. Daniel 8 also shows us that with the Medes and the Persians. Then after that, a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. This is Greece. Greece had 4 generals. 4 generals. Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassandra, and what was the other one? Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassandra, and it was another one. Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassandra. I can't remember the 4th one. Anyway, there were 4 generals under Alexander the Great. Ptolemy, which ended up becoming the king of the south. Seleucus, which ended up becoming the king of the north. Cassandra, and I can't remember the other one. One was east, one was in Jerusalem, and one was east of Jerusalem. And it ended up becoming the king of the north and the king of the south, which is what Daniel 11 is all about. But anyway, that's why it had 4 heads and 4 wings. Okay, again, it's divided into 4. Greece. Okay, then after that, the 4th one we know to be Rome. And it says about Rome, it says dreadful and terrible, devoured, stamped, and residue, the most violent of all. So let's take a look at these metals again real quick. Gold, silver, brass, and iron, right? Gold is the most valuable of the 4. It is also the softest metal. Silver is a little less valuable, a little slightly harder than gold. Brass is less valuable still, but harder than the other 2. The one that's the hardest of all and the least valuable is iron. That's why it says it devoured, break in pieces, and stomped the residue. The most violent, the most cruel, the most ruthless was the iron. Okay, the one that's in charge today. Okay, so you see now, I want to also bring you one more point with this, which we're going to review later on. If you conglomerate all of these 4 beasts together, it becomes the beast of Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 and 2. And it's led by the 10 horns. Okay? 10 horns meaning 10 powers, divided into 10 divisions and 10 powers. That's horns, right? That 4th beast. So we're talking about Rome. We're focusing on the 4th one today. So let's take a look at that. Verse 8, Daniel chapter 7, verse 8. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them a little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So when Rome came to power, it was the Roman Empire. But then its power started waning, and it transformed, it re-engineered itself, reinvented itself, as it were. And it became a religious power that had military friends, which it is today. And it became the Holy Roman Empire. Now, in becoming the Holy Roman Empire, that was in the 6th century. I told you that was in the 6th century. First, it started with Constantine in the 4th century. Then in the 6th century, it became friends with the kings of Europe, and the kings of Europe divided into 10 different kings. You had your French, your Germans, your Anglo-Saxons, you had your Alemanni, your Burgundians, you had Visigoths, you had all of these different people that was their own little divisions of Europe at that time. What we know now is places like Portugal and Spain and Italy. They had different names then, but there were 10 divisions. 3 of those divisions decided, we're not with this new Christian religion. We're not with it. We're going to keep our own religion. And there was war. And the king of France and other kings joined forces to force those three, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, and the Vandals, to submit to Christianity. That's what they call a crusade. Watch whenever you hear a politician with power of military might to use the word crusade. Because what he really means is we're going to rape, pillage, and kill until you submit and convert. Okay? That's how Islam spread as well. They have that in common. All right. So now you see what the horns mean. But in Revelation 13, you'll see 10 horns again. And Revelation 17 says these 10 horns have received no kingdom as yet. What does that mean? It's the reestablishment of the ancient power led by Rome. Today, that power that's conglomerated among nations is found in a specific entity. Let me ask you, what entity today joins power of nations together? What entity do you have today, right now, that joins power of nations together? And it's a relatively, historically speaking, it's a relatively new entity because I think it's been around like less than 100 years. It started under Woodrow Wilson, another wicked devil, Woodrow Wilson, that was called the League of Nations. But then it disbanded. And after World War II, it came back, which was part of the purpose of World War II. It came back and it changed its name. It used to be called the United Nations. And in the United Nations, you have what they call the 10 industrialized nations. Well, now they call it, it's been different numbers over the years, and it's assigned to us. Right now, it's 8. They call it the G8. Y'all know that, right? And then every year, the president of the United States comes, and they meet at different places, the G8. Who is that? It's Japan. It's Canada, it's the United States, it's Britain, it's Spain, it's Italy, it's Portugal, it's Germany. Now, you also have Brazil and India that have been invited to come to the meetings. They're not officially part of the G8, but they've been invited to come to meetings with the G8. Eventually, as we're seeing here in Revelation showing us, they're going to be 10. Eventually, they're going to be 10. I don't know what 10 is going to be, but when you see that they're now called, whenever you see them called G10, it's never happened. So whenever you see them called G10, you already know, right? And so, okay, you're following that? So now, but early part in the establishment of the Holy Roman Empire, there was 10, and then it went down to 7 because the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, and the Vandals were destroyed and forced to convert. All right, everybody follow me so far? All right, so now we're focusing on that 4th beast, Rome. So now in Daniel 7, let's skip down so that we're talking about the 4th beast. Now the Bible talks about it in judgment also, and it also talks about the establishment of the Messiah's kingdom. In fact, let's read that. In Daniel chapter, let's read verse 9, from verse 9 down to verse 14. Daniel 7, 9 to 14. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like a fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery flame issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were open. I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. And I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, clothed with the clouds of heaven, came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, And they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. That, my friends, is Revelation chapter 5. Let's look at it, the same thing in Revelation chapter 5, which begins the 7 seals. Revelation chapter 5, and we'll come back to that. Revelation chapter 5. Beginning at verse 1, Revelation 5, and going down to verse 8. Revelation chapter 5, 1 through 8 is the same as what we just read in Daniel chapter 7 from verse 13 and 14. Okay, here we go. And I saw on the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within and on the backside, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the book and to loose the seals thereof? And no man in heaven, nor in earth, neither under the earth, was able to open the book, neither to look thereon. And I wept much, because no man was found worthy to open and to read the book, neither to look thereon. And one of the elders said unto me, weep not. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne, and in the midst of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb, as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of Yahweh, sent forth into all the earth. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of him that sat on the throne. And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. Praise the Most High. So you can see here, the kingdom given to the Lamb in Revelation is the same as the kingdom given to the Son of Man from the Ancient of Days, who's the Father, in Daniel chapter 7. But now let's focus again on that 4th beast, okay, that became the little horn in Daniel 7. Let's take a look. Daniel chapter 7. Going to start at verse 16. I'm going to start at verse 16. And I'm going to go down from verse 16 down to verse 25. Daniel chapter 7, 16 to 25. And I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of the things. These great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. And the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. The 4th beast is the 4th kingdom, which shall devour how much of the earth? The whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. We don't have time to go into more about that, because Daniel 8 gives you even more. Read that when you get a chance. But it's telling you what is happening now. Okay? Notice again. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. And another shall rise after them. And he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they, that is the saints, shall be given into his hand until a time, times, and the dividing of time. That time, times, and the dividing of time is powerful. Is representing various things of the same number. 1,260 days, which is 3.5 years, 1,260 days. 1,260 years also, which is a time period that's also thing. It matches several things. And so we're going to talk about that. But with Thyatira, this is the rise of the Catholic Church right here. And the little horn is the Pope. Okay? And he's ruling in secret. This is the woman that is talked about in Revelation chapter 17. Revelation chapter 17. A woman represents a religious entity. The Most High said, I've likened the daughter of Zion to a comely and delicate woman. And he said, Paul said, you think I'm talking about the wife and the husband, but I'm talking about Messiah and the church or the nation. Okay, so the woman represents the nation, represents the so-called church. I don't like to use the word church because you also brainwash some of y'all that you think of some building with a cross on it. That's not church in the Bible. Church is the assembly, the scattered nation that has been assembled. And the Most High said, I brought you out of Egypt. And I'm going to gather you again a second time out of the earth and gather Israel and Judah. That's the church. Okay. Acts calls it, Stephen called it the church in the wilderness. That is the nation that was coming across the desert to the promised land. That's the church. Upon this rock, that is Messiah, I'm going to build my church. I'm going to build my nation. As you saw, it is not a church that's going to inherit the kingdom. It's a king and a nation. Okay, that's why I don't like to use the word church, because some people are so brainwashed. You use the word church. Whoop, it's pastor so and so. It's Reverend Pastor so and so. No, that's not in the Bible. That's made up by Rome. The modern vernacular for church came from Rome. That's why it said it deceiveth the whole earth. Anyway, Revelation 17. Let's look at 17. And I'm going to read from 1 to 4. And I want you to understand when it says why it's telling you this little horn is ruling and how it's ruling. And it's ruling right now. And most people don't know it. Revelation 17, beginning at verse 1. And there came one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, come hither. I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. That includes the saints. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman. He carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. So this woman is in a desolate place. Nobody sees her. Yet she's ruling everything. She's riding a beast, controlling. Right? When you ride an animal, you're controlling it. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. Verse 5. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. That is your Catholic Church. That is your fourth church, Thyatira. It rose after, and let's go now to Revelation chapter 2. Revelation chapter 2. And we saw already when we studied Ephesus. We studied Ephesus in Revelation chapter 2. We studied Ephesus, and we looked at Smyrna, and we looked at Pergamos. Ephesus was the first century church after the resurrection of Messiah to the high priestly ministry. Smyrna was Diocletian, who decided to kill all the converts of the Messiah, who now the heathen call Christians, but they didn't call themselves Christians. Some people have a problem with it. They got one guy trolling me talking about, but Christian means Dio, this is what it means. And look, man, the heathen called. You never hear in the Bible, please find this for me, where the believers of Messiah called each other Christians. You will find 3 times that the word Christian is in the Bible. In this whole thick book, 3 times you'll see that word. And it's others calling Hebrews Christians. It's Gentiles calling Hebrews Christians. Hebrews did not call themselves Christians. Okay? Messiah is called Messiah by the Hebrews. It's translated in Greek to Christos, Christ. Just like his name was not Jesus, we know his name wasn't Jesus. How do we know Messiah's name wasn't Jesus? It was translated Jesus in the original King James Bible. And then after King James Bible was introduced in 1611 with Jesus in it, the Greeks, the Romans and Latins added a letter to the English alphabet, the letter J. And everything in the Bible that was Yeh became Jah. That's why you got Jesus now, or Jesus, instead of Jesus. But that wasn't his name because there was no J when he existed. And there's no J's in the Hebrew alphabet. We know his real name starts with what we would call a Y. Yah. That's how his name starts. Yah. Now we say, as we find it, Yahweh Shah, as we find it. Some people say Yahshua. Okay. Some people say Yahuwah. Okay, whatever. But it's Yah. It's not Jesus. So those of us that are not awakened yet still call him Jesus, and the Most High acknowledges that. I used to call him Jesus. I didn't know any better. But when you start to get enlightened by the Most High and you start to get awakened as a Hebrew, you start to understand that's not his name. Not only did they change his name, they changed his character to a Caucasian man, as we know, and you're trying to change him into something he's not. He's a Hebrew, line of the tribe of Judah, a man of color. Okay? But see, they all change that. And they don't understand in the brainwashed mind how Christianity has changed everything. But here, in Revelation chapter 2, it explains to us and how it started. And remember, when we got to Pergamos, it talked about Balaam. Remember? It talked about reading Numbers 26, talked about Balaam. Who is Balaam? A turncoat that traded in his faith for money and influence of the heathen. That's what he did. And so they used Balaam. And then the Nicolaitans, which turned the grace of Yah into lasciviousness. That's Christianity. That came with Constantine, who worshiped multiple gods all the way to his death. That's the first man that was a Christian. Then came after him the establishment of the entity that he left behind when he died. 200 over the course of 200 years became established as an entity, as an institution, the Roman Catholic Church. And every Christian denomination that you have today was once Roman Catholic. They all come out of people that were Roman Catholic, all of them. That's why she's the mother of harlots. I'm not explaining this to you because I'm smart. It's because it's time. It's prophetic time. Remember what Messiah said, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Paul said the same thing, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled, Romans chapter 11. And time of the Gentiles is now being fulfilled. And so the awakening that Deuteronomy talks about, that Jeremiah talks about, that Ezekiel talks about, that Isaiah talks about, that Zephaniah talks about, that Zechariah talks about, that Malachi talks about, that Micah talks about, that Hosea talks about, that Amos talks about, that all the prophets talk about, is now happening. Okay? It's now happening. And all my job is to teach it and present it. The Spirit of the Father, Yah, brings to himself those that are going to be saved. That's not in my control. I would want everybody to come to the truth and be saved. Father does too. He says it in 1 Timothy chapter 2. But he also knows, and he has told us multiple times, it's only going to be a remnant of the Israelite people and a remnant of the heathen. He also told us that he's going to purge from the Israelites, the rebels, from among us. Okay? That's already being done. It's already starting now. Okay? There are those of us awakening and those of us still wanting to act the fool. He's already going to stomp that out. He's going to use Babylon, stomp that out. That's what's going on right now. Okay. Revelation chapter 2. So now we're in the fourth church, Thyatira. Revelation chapter 2, beginning at verse 18. Revelation chapter 2, beginning at verse 18. And unto the angel of the church in Thyatira write, these things saith the Son of Yah, who hath his eyes like unto a flame of fire, and his feet are like fine brass. Why would he mention that against the Roman Catholic Church? I know thy works, and charity, and service, and faith, and thy patience, and thy works, the last to be more than the first. Notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel. Now he mentions Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess. In other words, she says she's a prophetess. She's religious. She's spiritual. To teach and to seduce my servants. Who is the servants that Jezebel taught and seduced? Israelites. To commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed to idols. This is Christianity. This is the Roman Catholic Church. They came with their own laws, their own rules. You got what they call it, Good Friday. You have all of these Easter. You have Christmas. All of this came with Rome. And it's taught all of y'all's chosen to do these things, to follow these things, to be under the control of these things. All Christianity, when we were taken in slaves, they beat us over the head with this same Bible, but they just took certain verses and twisted it so that we will be suffering peacefully, as Malcolm X said. We'll be happy slaves. Yes, a master. And they put white Jesus in front of us for centuries. And then those of us that didn't get taken by ships across the Atlantic, here come Muhammad's from the other side with their swords, forcing us to convert to Islam. See? We're going to talk about Islam later. But right now, we're talking about Christianity. Okay, right now we're talking about Christianity. Islam comes under Sardis. But let's talk about Christianity, because that's what we're dealing with here. Jezebel called herself a prophetess, seduced my servants. This is the 6th century, 508 approximately, when the king of France decided that the bishop of Rome was the corrector of all heretics. They would decide what a heretic was. They would have an institution called the Roman Catholic Church, the Holy Roman Empire. And it would go unchecked for 1,260 years. We're going to talk about that later. But here we are. This is the Roman Church. This is the rise and development of the great whore right here. Jezebel. So he calls her a great whore that sits upon many waters. He calls her Jezebel. It's the little horn. All the same thing, y'all. The beast that rise up out of the water, it's the same thing. All of it's the same thing. Don't get it twisted. They're all the same. Okay? Different ways of saying the same thing. Bible does that a lot. The Bible does that a lot. Like, some people get confused. My wife and I were talking about how because the different feasts have different names, people get confused and think they're all different. You have 3 feasts, and they all have different names, but there's only 3. When the Bible gives you a number, it's that number. That's a way for helping us to discern things. So when it says there's 3, there's 3. Okay, once you understand and believe that, you won't get confused by the different names because he's telling you there's 3. If it says there's 144,000, guess what? There's 144,000. If it says there's 12 tribes, guess what? It's 12. If it says there's 12 apostles, guess what? It's 12. See, there's certain things that, again, you got standards of truth in the word, and they tell you these standards help you from being confused. As long as you believe them. Did he create the earth in 7 days? Yes, 7 days. And every 7th day is a Sabbath. Because the 7th day, he created the Sabbath. Every 7th day is the Sabbath. Did he create the new moon? Yes, he did. Every new moon is the beginning of a month. See, you have certain standards that he's showing us. Praise the Most High. Okay? Okay. So here, the fourth church, Jezebel. Let's start at verse 21. That's right. I gave her space to repent of her fornication, and she repented not. So in other words, as this power was rising, this abomination that maketh desolation, the Most High was trying to reach people that were in this power. That's where you get your Martin Luthers from. You get your William Tyndales, right? Your John Husses, your John Knoxes, and all of these men were Roman Catholic priests that ended up trying to reform Rome. That was the Reformation. If you've heard of the period of the Reformation, it was the idea, the reason it was called that is because it was designed to reform the Roman Catholic Church. And all these guys were called reformers of the Roman Catholic Church. And that's why he said, I gave them space to repent, and they repented not. These men were calling on Rome to repent, all of them. None of them ever wanted to leave the Roman Catholic Church. They never intended to start the Lutheran Church, the Baptist Church, the Puritans. They never intended to start these organizations that came out of Rome, that came out of the Great Whore. But I will say this, the Reformation failed. Most people don't acknowledge that. But if the idea of the Reformation and of these men were to reform the Roman Catholic Church, we need to ask ourselves a question. Has the Roman Catholic Church been reformed, or did it actually infiltrate and take over all these other churches? So that the object of the Reformation failed. The Protestant movement failed. And all you have is babies of the same whore. That's all you have now. Okay? Let's continue. Revelation chapter 2, verse 22. Behold, I will cast her into a bed, and them that commit adultery with her into great tribulation, except they repent of their deeds. I will kill her children with death, and all the churches shall know that I am he which searcheth the reins and hearts, and will give unto every one of you according to your works. You see, brethren, you and I are not set up as judges over individuals that are in these churches. There are those that are going to be lost, but there are some within these churches that are going to be saved. Why? Because they don't know any better. They've been born and raised. Imagine a church that's been in existence for more than 1,000 years. You know, there's going to be people born into it and don't know any better, whose fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers were in it. They don't know any better. Now, the Bible says, in times of ignorance, Yah winks. But now he commands all men everywhere to repent. So in other words, when light comes, he's expecting repentance. But there are those that were just ignorant, and he didn't know. They didn't know any better. Yah will judge them as he judges them. There are people in all religions like that. People born into Islam, people born into Buddhism, Hinduism, Catholicism, Protestant Christianity that didn't know any better. And notice what he says here. Verse 24, Revelation 2:24. But unto you I say, and unto the rest in Thyatira, as many as have not this doctrine, which have not known the depths of Satan as they speak, I will lay upon you no other burden. There are people like your Martin Luthers, like your William Tyndales, who was burned and the stake and strangled. There are people that really didn't know what I know and what you know now. They didn't understand who the true Hebrews were. They didn't understand that they were just part of a great whore. They were trying their best to do what they thought was best, what they thought was righteous. And he said, I'm going to lay on you no other burden. So in other words, the Most High will hold me more accountable for what I know than what William Tyndale might have known, because he's given me more than he's given William Tyndale. I have to give an account. William Tyndale's account won't be the same because he didn't know what I know. He's not of the chosen seed. You understand? So I'm going to lay on you another burden. There's people that's dying every day. Our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, our grandfathers, They've been in there, whatever their religious organization affiliation were in, they thought it was true. I was a fourth generation Seventh-day Adventist. My great grandfather was the first one. He was alive when Ellen White was alive and all of them. And he was in Jamaica, and he was an elder, and he was doing all this. He was a maroon that came from the mountains, and he was an elder. And he had 7 children with my great grandmother. One of them was my grandmother. And they thought that that was the truth. He died thinking that was true. He wasn't shunning from any truth. And there are a lot of people like that. He's going to lay on them no other burden, because our Most High is merciful. That's what the 1,000 years will be for. Giving education in part, giving education to those that have died, and he didn't lay on them no other burden. There'll be a lot of people that when they keep the Sabbath on the Sea of Glass, it's going to be the first Sabbath they ever kept. The first time they heard it. When they see Black Jesus, they're not going to see, they're going to be surprised, because they're going to be, what? But they would have followed him no matter what color he was. They just didn't know. There's a lot of ignorance previous to now, but light is now dawning on planet Earth. And the Most High is ready to give a blessing to those that are following the light of truth. The blessing is the fullness of the power, his spirit of righteousness. He's ready to pour that on his people that are following the truth and walking out of darkness into the marvelous light. Praise the Most High. So even in Thyatira, he said, you have not known the depths of Satan. You're under Jezebel and you don't realize it. I'm not going to lay on you any other burden. Isn't he merciful? Isn't the Most High Yah beautiful, man? Praise the Most High. Let's continue. Revelation chapter 2. Let's read that again. Verse 24, 25, 26, 27, down to verse 28 and 29. Actually, from 24 to 29, because that's the church of the Roman Catholic Church, Thyatira. But unto you I say, and to the rest in Thyatira, as many as have not this doctrine, which have not known the depths of Satan as they speak, I will put upon you none other burden. But that which ye have already hold fast till I come. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron. You've heard that before. That's Revelation 19. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron, as the vessels of a potter shall they be broken to shivers, even as I have received of my Father. And I will give him the morning star. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. So you see, those of us that come in the light of truth, he's telling us we're going to receive the fullness of the power of the life-giving Spirit from the Father. We're going to be sealed in our foreheads, and we're going to be part of the destruction of this system. He said, you're going to rule over them with a rod of iron. That's the blessing of us who follow the truth and not try to feign ignorance. Praise the Most High Yah. Praise the Most High Yah. So there is Thyatira, and that's an important one I wanted to go through because it's going to play a role from this point all the way to the end of the book of Revelation. Now, this is going to play a role until the first resurrection. Okay, after the first resurrection, no more, but all the way to the first resurrection, which is Revelation chapter 19 and goes into Revelation chapter 20, the first resurrection. So Rome is going to be playing a role in everything here, because this is Jezebel. This is the little horn. This is the power, the fourth beast, the last one before the kingdom of Yah is established. Okay, praise the Most High. So the next session will start at 1:30, and we're going to come back at 1:30, and we're going to have a question and answer. I put the email in the description boxes for this video and the video before that last night. You can see the email address, and you can put it in there, and then we'll try to answer the questions at 1:30. So we're going to do Sardis next Friday by the grace of the Most High. We'll start Sardis. All right. But until then, the Most High bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you, and lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. We'll be back at 1:30 Eastern time. If we see you, praise the Most High. If not, praise the Most High anyway. Enjoy Shabbat. Sure.
Shalom.